We are at the end of August, and with that means training camp and preseason is right around the corner, and it's time to start previewing the divisions. And today we are starting with the Hurricanes division, the Metropolitan Division. We'll preview that division, give our predictions for it, all in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of this Tuesday afternoon. I forgot what day it was for a second there, Andrew. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Andrew Schnittker. How are you doing today?
Do this for a while. Now, we've been waiting on a certain trade that we knew was going to happen and was probably going to impact the Metro, and lo and behold, it did. But now we feel like all the major dust on the division has probably settled. Ironically, if there's any more major moves to come, they're probably going to come from the Hurricanes. But I feel like that we now have a pretty good picture and can take stock of the division, under the current format. Divisional play, divisional battles, very, very important in the NHL. So we can kind of look at, how the Hurricanes are going to stack up compared to the rest of the division. Spoiler alert, it's favorable going into this season as they look to win a second straight Metropolitan Division title and a third straight, a third straight division title overall. COVID era jumbled my brain for a second there.
Yeah, you're good. And we'll start out talking about the Canes. We won't spend a whole lot of time on it just because we've been talking about it a lot. So we've kind of covered all of this stuff already. Obviously, they've made, some good offseason moves. Their defensive core that was already loaded and stacked is even more so now with the addition of Dmitry Orlov. And they're going to be a good regular season team. That's a given. They always are nowadays. It's just going to be, can it stay that way throughout the playoffs? I think a big thing with that is going to be, can they stay healthy? If they have a healthy Andrei Svechnikov, I think their chances are looking pretty good there. And to no surprise, they are a lot of people's preseason picks to win a Stanley Cup. I'm seeing a lot of Sebastian Aho for the Conn Smythe. So this team is going to be good. We know that. You guys listening, you guys know the Hurricanes are going to be good this year. The Metro is theirs to lose, but they are going to have some stiff competition this year as well. But again, they have a really good team on paper. We've seen what this core of players can do in the past. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how they're doing this year. They're my pick to win the Metro again. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun season for the Hurricanes, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're also my pick to win the Metro again. For everything you just talked about, especially like we've said, we expect them to trade away one of Brett Pesce or Brady Shea and potentially use that as a move to add another forward, which I think would make the overall picture better. But as we've talked about, as they stand right now, they don't have to make another move. And if you just go into the season with what they've done with adding Dmitry Orlov, adding Michael Bunting, adding Tony DeAngelo as that second power play quarterback, they've added some more defensive depth. They've signed Caleb Jones, who actually, if you look at the analytics, played pretty well in a second pairing role for a god-awful Chicago Blackhawks team last year. I don't expect him to play regularly at all for the Hurricanes, but it's good depth to have. It's another good depth defenseman. Don Waddell said it. You certainly can never have enough defensemen. He is certainly living by that mantra this offseason. The Hurricanes also brought in Nathan Bellio on a PTO. He's been around. He was most recently with the Ducks, I think. He spent a
Mhm.
while with Montreal. Walt Ruff covers the the Hurricanes in-house beat writer. Pointed out that the Hurricanes kind of need at least 12 defensemen in camp because I think there's one day where they're doing one of those split squad
Yeah.
preseason game type things, and
Yeah.
Bellio brings them up to that number. So I really, really don't expect him to make the team. He's just, sometimes you bring in a camp body. Maybe he does well with the Hurricanes in camp and he, ends up signing on with somebody else. But
Mhm.
it's just funny. It feels like the Hurricanes have led the league this offseason in, hey, here's a depth defenseman you've heard of. We signed him.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, and you never know if he does good on his PTO, like you said, with that split day in preseason. You never know. He could, like you said, the Hurricanes are a team that's just signing up every defenseman. Maybe they sign him to like a two-way deal, send him down to the AHL, wherever they end up whoever they end up working with. I know Waddell has talked about that a little bit already of talking to other teams about sharing an affiliate next season. They should be good to go. So I wouldn't necessarily rule that out either, but we'll just have to wait and see. Again, we've talked a lot about the Hurricanes and what they've done this offseason, and it's been a good one. But we'll just have to see if they do anything else. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. They don't necessarily have to, but it wouldn't surprise us if they do. Now, moving on, we are going to hit. Who do you want to talk about next, Andrew? How do
Well,
you want to go about this?
we talked about this beforehand. We figured what we're going to do here is we started at the top from the Hurricanes, but we're
Mhm.
going to plunge here. We're going to dive down into the scary depths of the Metropolitan Division, where dark and shadowy monsters that will be in closer contention for the number one overall pick than the Stanley Cup playoffs are lurking. But yeah, we're going to go from the bottom up of where
Mhm.
Jared and I expect these Metropolitan teams to finish. There's a couple that we've got that are somewhat interchangeable that I wouldn't be shocked
Yeah.
if one finished above the other. But we
Yeah.
are going to start at the basement. Jared is wearing an orange shirt. I appear to be wearing an orange shirt with my lighting, but I'm actually wearing a Hurricanes Sebastian Aho jersey. But we are going to start in the orange, in the basement, with a team that I think might be the worst team in the National Hockey League this season, the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, they are they're going to be bottom of the division for sure. They're in full rebuild mode. They're, basically anyone on their roster that anyone wants, they're probably going to listen to. Offers on that is basically a fire sale at this point. And yeah, I just like you said, they're going to be in contention for the number one pick. It's going to be a rough season for Philly. Uh, Now, when they play Metro teams, we always say this, it doesn't matter if they're the top team, if they're the bottom team. Metro teams always play each other really, really tough. So Philly isn't going to be a pushover by any means. We want to stress that. They are, at the end of the day, still a National Hockey League team, and they have guys on their roster that are good enough to play in the NHL. Maybe not for every team, but they are an NHL team. So you can never count them out. Anything can happen on any given night. But yeah, Philly, I do not have high hopes for them. They're going to be a rough team to watch this year. And then they have their head coach, and we heard about all the stuff behind the scenes, but this past season, folks butting heads. So it's going to be a rough year in Philly, that's for sure. And bottom of the division.
Yeah, you mentioned the head coach. I don't expect John Tortorella to finish the 2023-24 season as the Philadelphia Flyers head coach. I think that is already not going very well. But yeah, I mean, you look at their offseason, they bought out Tony DeAngelo. He ends up back with the Hurricanes. They traded away Kevin Hayes. They traded away Ivan Provorov, which I felt like they actually did pretty well on that one, especially for a team with their objectives, getting a first-round pick, I believe, from the Kings in that three-way trade with them and Columbus, who, spoiler alert, you'll hear about very soon. But, yeah, I mean, you look at their roster, I mean, like, who scares you? I mean, they've got Travis Konechny. I think Sean Couturier is supposed to be back healthy. Those are two good players, but again, like you said, they're kind of in fire sale mode. They might not trade Konechny just because he's a younger piece. He's a really good piece. He's on a bargain 2 years left with $5.5 million cap hit. I continue to say that he would look real nice in red, black, and white, but I digress. Yeah, the Flyers they're a bad hockey team. They're
they're
not going to be good.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to be good. And we will dive into another team that we think will improve but still not be really good right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, we've talked a lot about how important it is to build a healthy foundation for your health. And our next partner can help you do that. And that is, of course, AG1. If you've been around listening to the show for a while, you know all about them. But if you're new, let me tell you about them. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple drinkable habit. I personally like to add a little bit of lemon juice into mine. Science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. AG1 helps you build your health foundation first. So if you want a healthy foundation as strong as the Carolina Hurricanes foundation is these days, AG1 has got you covered. So if a comprehensive solution is what you need for your supplement routine, then try AG1 and go get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. So go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Go check it out, folks. Now, moving on up into the number 7 spot, and that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. We're both in the same boat on that one. I do think they could potentially finish a bit higher. I do think they could maybe hit that number 6 spot in the division. But outside of that, I think anything past that is a bit of a reach. But again, they are going to be an improved team from last year. And they added Damon Severson and Ivan Provorov, like we mentioned. That's really going to add a boost to their blue line. But then the one that everyone's talking about is their first-round draft pick. I'm probably going to butcher the last name up, but Adam Fantilli. I probably butchered that.
That's how I would say it. That doesn't mean it's right, but
yeah, but that's going to be a big addition. And of course, they still have Patrick Laine. They still have Johnny Gaudreau on that team. So they still have, like some really good pieces. They did bring in Mike Babcock as head coach. He's an upgrade over what they had, but still, not a fan of him and his way of doing things. But yeah, they're going to be an improved team, but they're still a ways away from, contending. Maybe they could be in a wild card bubble, but I think that'd kind of be the ceiling for them at this point.
Yeah, I think there's kind of tiers to the Metro right now. There may be 2, 3, 4. I think the Flyers are in a tier by themselves because they're so bad. I think the Blue Jackets and the team we have at 6 are in a tier. Like you said, I could see the Blue Jackets finishing 6th. It's hard to see them going higher than that just because the other teams in the Metro are so good. And you mentioned the wild card bubble. We'll get to the Atlantic in a future episode, but I think there's teams from that division that are much more likely to contend for a wild card. So yeah, the Blue Jackets are interesting. They have a decent decor now, with adding Ivan Provorov and Damon Severson to Zach Werenski. I don't think Provorov is that good.
Mhm.
They're also still playing Eric Goodbranson $4 million for 3 more years for some reason that's beyond me. Have a pretty good group of wingers. Like you
Mhm.
you mentioned Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine. That's a really good start. I have two issues with this team. There's no one who's even close to being a number one, top center that you need. I mean, obviously they drafted Adam Fantilli. Maybe I'm sure the hope is that he gets there, and he could. I think he's a really good player, really good
Mhm.
prospect, but asking him to be that in his rookie year. Now, guys have done it before, but
Yeah.
I don't know how realistic that is. And then their goaltending.
Yeah.
Elvis Mers Lincolns and Daniil Tarasov. Eh.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, so like I think they're on the right track with some of the moves that they've made with drafting Fantilli, with upgrading their defense. Although again, they paid a little bit more than I probably would for either. Well, actually, I think the Severson contract is reasonable. I don't know that I would have been that keen on bringing in Ivan Provorov. Like I said, I don't think he's awesome. I don't think he's a top pairing defender. Um, but he's an upgrade, like you said, with Babcock over what they had. So I think they're improved. I just don't think they're improved enough to make a big jump up the division standings. They could prove me wrong. They have players, who are capable of, like Johnny Gaudreau. They have at least one like dude who can put a
Mhm.
team on his back. But just in this Metro division, it's hard for me to see them rising much higher than sixth, maybe fifth.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of six, we can move on to there. And this is one that before we started recording, I totally forgot to put them
Which is
on my
wild,
list.
like to be
Yeah,
saying
because
that about
they've
this
been
team when it tells you where they are these days. But
Yeah, exactly. And that is the Washington Capitals. They've had a pretty quiet offseason for the most part, really, with the two biggest moves they did was signing Max Pacioretty and then Tom Wilson to a long-term extension. That was really it that they've done this offseason. They haven't done a whole heck of a lot. Now, they obviously have one of the best players ever with Alex Ovechkin on their team. So, they're not going to be, god awful. They're not going to be Philly, you know, but, putting them any higher than six is a bit of a reach for them at this point. They have really fallen off. They had their window of success, but it has definitely gotten to that point for them where they're starting to peter out, and they're gonna get to that rebuilding stage here before too long, which is wild to think because they're so good for so long, but it happens to everyone. um but yeah, Washington really don't have high hopes for them. They're kind of middle of the pack of the Metro at best.
yeah, I think you're right. Now, like with them, it's a lot easier than it is with, say, Columbus. It's
Yeah.
weird because there's like a range of outcomes. I can see them continuing to decline further and
Yep.
finishing below Columbus. It's also not like that hard to see them bouncing back and pushing for a wild card. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, they still have Alex Ovechkin, they still have Nicholas Backstrom,
Hmm.
still have Evgeny Kuznetsov, still have TJ Oshie. Some
Hmm.
of those, I mean, Oshie and Backstrom, Ovechkin, all those guys are getting up there in age. I do think the Capitals are kind of in the point that the Blackhawks reached where they're officially on the bad side of the hump, and it's probably going to be a while until we see them in the playoffs again. You look at their blue line outside of John Carlson, there's not really anything that excites me. Their goaltending, Darcy Kemper wasn't very good in his first season
Hmm.
for them. I do like Pacioretty as a
Yeah.
low risk, potentially high reward signing for them if they stay healthy, especially if you can put him out there on that top power play unit with Alex Ovechkin, or on the second power play unit, give them another shooter for that. I like that for them. Again, if he stays healthy, he's coming off two Achilles tears within the span of a year, so we don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're on the same page here. I don't see them as a playoff team. They could be, but I think they're in their decline.
Yeah, I agree there. I definitely think they're in their decline. One that, the other, old guard team of the Metro has done a lot to avoid, and we'll talk about them later. But we will continue our Metro Division preview right after this quick break, folks. All right, folks, we are back, and we just finished talking about the Washington Capitals, and now next up for me, I believe it's the same for you, is the New York Islanders. Yeah, and for me, them, Washington, and Columbus are all kind of interchangeable, really. I think, those can kind of all they figure out where they figure out, pretty much. But the Islanders, much like Washington, just did not do a whole lot this offseason. If anything, it kind of feels like they took a step back. Um, aside from trading for Bo Horvat, the trade deadline, they've been really, really quiet, aside from, just taking care of stuff in-house with extensions. Haven't really done a whole lot. I know, they're obviously, an older team as well, kind of like Washington. Not as old as Washington, but they are an older team as well. So they at least do have the goaltending on their side. They did lock up Sorokin long term. So they do have that working for them. So that's going to give them an edge over Washington, as you can kind of see in our standings. For me, that was what gave them the edge over Washington, was just the fact that their goaltending is better. Maybe that can help carry them like it did last year. We saw it with the playoffs. Sorokin, he really put that team on his back a lot. So we'll see what happens with them, but they're another team I don't have high hopes for this year. But their goaltending is at least going to be something that could keep them in contention for sure.
Yeah, I don't see the Islanders as a playoff team going into this year, but it's a lot easier to see them pushing and making it into the playoffs than it is with, say, Washington or Columbus, because a lot of what you just mentioned, Ilya Sorokin, you can make an argument that he's the best goalie in the NHL right now. Just elite goaltending, can steal games for them, can put the team on his back, like you said. Anytime you have a guy like that between the pipes, you've got a shot. I do think they're a bubble team, like more so than Washington or Columbus. They're on the bubble, like they will be in the playoff race. The other thing that's going to be interesting for them, you mentioned Bo Horvat. Last year, Matt Barzal was hurt for a while. I do believe he was back for the playoff series against the Hurricanes, but the Islanders did not have much of what they're envisioning, of Matt Barzal as their number one center, Horvat as their number two. So seeing them with a full season of that 1-2 punch down the middle that I think is really good in Barzal and Horvat plus Sorokin in goal, you definitely can see them as a playoff team. I think the four teams that we have above them are just better. Although there's one that I could definitely see them finishing above. And then I think the Atlantic probably gets four playoff teams this year. So I feel like the Islanders they could be the first team out. They're like, think of this in a college basketball sense. We're talking about the bracket. They're either the first team out or the last team in, I think, in the Eastern Conference playoff picture. But like I said, with Sorokin, with that 1-2 punch down the middle of Barzal and Horvat, it is a lot easier to see them having things break right and getting in than it is with some of the other teams that we have already talked about today.
Yeah, I agree there. I definitely think that it's going to be an interesting season for the Islanders, I think. Yeah, because like you said, they're going to have healthy players now, much like with like we talked about with Andrei Svechnikov and the Hurricanes. They didn't have him in the playoffs. Things could have went a whole heck of a lot differently had they had him. So, we'll just see what ends up happening with the New York Islanders this season. But we still have the top half of the Metro teams to get through, and we will do that in the next episode, folks. So make sure you are following along on the socials at @LO_Hurricanes, myself at Jared Ellis _96, and Andrew at ASchnitt53. And we'll talk to you guys in the next episode when we continue previewing the Metro Division for this upcoming season. And as always, folks, let's go Canes.